class, but in the wrong location. I was in way over my head. He'd always say the same thing. Don't worry, you'll be alright. And don't forget, you always have your brother here. But I wasn't the one forgetting. Willie told me to pretend I didn't know him. What? You don't know me, Harold, and I don't know you. For the last 2 years, he explained, Eden had been his sanctuary. No kid brother tagging along, pestering him with questions, pushing up on his social circle. He was forging his own life, and he wasn't willing to give that up. None of which was all that new. Willie always hated it when anyone made the mistake of thinking us a package deal. He loathed it when Mummy dressed us in the same outfits. It didn't help that her taste in children's clothes ran to the extreme. We often looked like the twins from Alice in Wonderland. I barely took notice. I didn't care about clothes, mine or anyone else's. So long as we weren't wearing kilts, that worrisome knife in your sock and that breeze up your ass, I was good. But for Willie, it was pure agony to wear the same blazer, the same tight shorts as me, and now to attend the same school was pure murder. I told him not to worry. I'll forget I ever knew you. But Eden wasn't going to make that easy. Thinking to be helpful, they put us under the same bloody roof. Manor House. At least I was on the ground floor. Willie was way upstairs, with the older boys. Chapter 17. Many of the 60 boys in Manor House were as welcoming as Willie. Their indifference, however, didn't unsettle me as much as their ease. Even the ones my age acted as if they'd been born on the school grounds. Ludgrove had its problems, but at least I knew my way around. Knew how to fox pat, knew when sweets got handed out, how to survive letter writing days. Over time, I'd scratched and clawed my way to the top of the Ludgrove pyramid. Now, at Eton, I was at the bottom again, starting over. Worse, without my best friend, Heathers. He was attending a different school. I didn't even know how to get dressed in the morning. Every Etonian was required to wear a black tailcoat, a white collarless shirt, white stiff collar pinned to the shirt with a stud, plus pinstripe trousers, heavy black shoes, and a tie that wasn't a tie, more like a cloth strip folded into the white detachable collar. Formal kit, they called it, but it wasn't formal, it was funereal. And there was a reason. We were supposed to be in perpetual mourning for old Henry VI, or else for King George, an early supporter of the school, who used to have the boys over to the castle for tea, or something like that. No, George was my great-great-great-great-great-grandfather, and though I was so sorry for his passing, and for whatever pain it had caused those who loved him, I wasn't keen on mourning the man around the clock. Any boy might balk at taking part in a never-ending funeral. For a boy who just lost his mum, it was a daily kick in the balls. First morning, it took forever to fasten my trousers, button my waistcoat, fold my stiff collar, before finally getting out the door. I was frantic, desperate not to be late, which would mean being forced to write my name in a large ledger, the Tardy book, one of the many new traditions I'd need to learn, along with a long list of new words and phrases. Classes were no longer classes, they were divs. Teachers were no longer teachers, they were beaks. Cigarettes were tabbage. Seemingly everyone had a raging tabbage habit. Chambers was the mid-morning meeting of the beaks, and they discussed the students, especially the problem students. I often felt my ears burning during chambers. Sport, I decided, would be my thing at Eton. Sporty boys were separated into two groups, dry bobs and wet bobs. Dry bobs played cricket, football, rugby or polo. Wet bobs rowed, sailed or swam. I was a dry who occasionally got wet. I played every dry sport, though rugby captured my heart. Beautiful game, plus a good excuse to run into stuff very hard. Rugby let me indulge my rage, which some had now taken to calling a red mist. Plus, I simply didn't feel pain the way other boys did, which made me scary on a pitch. No one had an answer for a boy actually seeking external pain to match his internal. I made some mates. It wasn't easy. I had special requirements. I needed someone who wouldn't tease me about being royal. Someone who wouldn't so much as mention my being the spare. I needed someone who'd treat me normal, which meant ignoring the armed bodyguard sleeping down the hall, whose job was to keep me from being kidnapped or assassinated. To say nothing of the electronic tracker and panic alarm I carried with me at all times. My mates all met these criteria. Sometimes my new mates and I would escape, head for Windsor Bridge, which connected Eton to Windsor over the River Thames. Specifically, we'd head to the underside of the bridge, where we could smoke tabbage in privacy. My mates seemed to enjoy the naughtiness of it, whereas I just did it because I was on autopilot. Sure, I fancied a cig after McDonald's, who didn't? But if we were going to bunk off, I'd much prefer heading over to Windsor Castle golf course, knocking a ball around while drinking a wee beer. Still, like a robot, I took every cig offered me, and in the same automatic, unthinking way, I soon graduated to weed. Chapter 18. The game required a bat, a tennis ball, and a total disregard for one's physical safety. There were 4 players, a bowler, a batsman, and 2 fielders stationed mid-corridor, each with 1 foot in the corridor and 1 in a room. Not always our rooms. We often intruded on other boys trying to work. They'd beg us to go away. Sorry, we said. This is our work. The radiator represented the wicket. There was an endless debate about what constituted a catch. Off the wall? Yes, catch. Off a window? No catch. 1 hand, 1 bounce? Half out. One day, the sportiest member of our group hurled himself at a ball, trying to make a tricky catch, and landed face first on a fire extinguisher hooked to the wall. His tongue split wide open. You'd think after that, after the carpet had been permanently soiled with his blood, we'd have called an end to corridor cricket. We didn't. When not playing corridor cricket, we'd loll in our rooms. We got very good at affecting postures of supreme indolence. The point was to look as if you had no purpose, as if you'd bestir yourself only to do something bad, or better yet, stupid. Near the end of my first half, we hit on something supremely stupid. Someone suggested that my hair was a complete disaster, like grass on the moors. Well, what can be done? Let me have a go at it. You? Yeah, let me shave it off. That didn't sound right. I wanted to go along. I wanted to be a top bloke, a funny bloke. All right. Someone fetched the clippers. Someone pushed me into a chair. How quickly, how blithely, after a lifetime of healthy growth, it all went cascading off my head. When the cutter was done, I looked down and saw a dozen pyramids of ginger on the floor, like red volcanoes seen from a plane, and knew I'd made a legendary mistake. I ran to the mirror. Suspicion confirmed. I screamed in horror. My mates screamed too, with laughter. I ran in circles. I wanted to reverse time. I wanted to scoop up the hair from the floor and glue it back on. I wanted to wake from this nightmare. Not knowing where else to turn, I violated the sacred rule, the one shining commandment never to be broken, and ran upstairs to Willie's room. Of course, there was nothing Willie could do. I was just hoping he'd tell me it would be okay. Don't freak out, keep calm, Harold. Instead, he laughed like the others. I recall him sitting at his desk, bent over a book, chuckling, while I stood before him, fingering the nubs on my newly bare scalp. Harold, what have you done? What a question. He sounded like Stewie from Family Guy. Wasn't it obvious? You shouldn't have done it, Harold. So we're just stating the obvious now. He said a few more things that were immensely unhelpful and I walked out. Worse ridicule was yet to come. A few days later, on the front page of the Daily Mirror, one of the tabloids, there I was with my new haircut. Headline, Harry the Skinhead. I couldn't imagine how they got wind of the story. A schoolmate must have told someone who told someone who told the papers. They had no photo, thank goodness. They'd improvised. The image on the front page was a computer-generated rendering of despair, bored as an egg. A lie. More than a lie, really. I looked bad, but not that bad. Chapter 19. I didn't think it could get worse. What a grievous mistake it is for a member of the royal family, when considering the media, to imagine that things can't get worse. Weeks later, the same newspaper put me on the front page again. Harry's had an accident. I'd broken a bone in my thumb playing rugby. No big deal. But the paper decided to make out that I was a lifesaver. Bad taste, under any circumstances. But a little more than a year after Mummy's alleged accident? Come on, fellas. I dealt with the British press all my life, but they'd never before singled me out. In fact, since Mummy's death, an unspoken agreement had governed press treatment of both her sons, and the agreement went like this: lay off, let them have their education in peace. Apparently that agreement had now expired, because there I was, splattered across the front page, made out to seem a delicate flower, or an ass, or both, knocking on death's door. I read the article several times. Despite the somber subtext, something's very wrong with Prince Harry. I marveled at his tone. Larky. My existence was just fun and games to these people. I wasn't a human being to them. I wasn't a 14-year-old boy hanging on by his fingernails. I was a cartoon character. A glove puppet to be manipulated and mocked for fun. So what if their fun made my already difficult days more difficult? Made me a laughingstock before my schoolmates, not to mention the wider world. So what if they were torturing a child? All was justified because I was royal, and in their minds, royal was synonymous with non-person. Centuries ago, royal men and women were considered divine. Now they were insects. What fun to pluck their wings. Par's office lodged a formal complaint, publicly demanded an apology, accused the paper of bullying his younger son. The newspaper told Par's office to sod off. Before trying to move on with my life, I took one last look at the article. Of all the things that surprised me about it, the truly flabbergasting thing was the absolutely shitty writing. I was a poor student, a dreadful writer, and yet I had enough education to recognise that this right here was a masterclass in illiteracy. To take one example, after explaining that I'd been grievously injured, that I was nearly at death's door, the article went on to caution breathlessly that the exact nature of my injury couldn't be revealed because the royal family had forbidden the editors to do so, as if my family had any control over these ghouls. To reassure you, we can say that Harry's injuries are not serious. The accident was considered grave enough for him to be taken to hospital. We believe you are entitled to know if an heir to the throne is involved in any accident, however small, if it results in injury. 2 buts in a row. Smug self-regard, the lack of coherence and absence of any real point, the hysterical nothingness of it all. This dog's dinner of a paragraph was said to be edited or more likely written by a young journalist whose name I scanned and then quickly forgot. I didn't think I'd ever run across it, or him, again. The way he wrote, I couldn't imagine he'd be a working journalist much longer. Chapter 20. I forgot who used the word first. Someone in the press, probably. One of my teachers. Whoever it took hold and circulated. Had been casting my role in the rolling royal melodrama. Long before I was old enough to drink a beer, legally, it became dogma. Harry? Yeah, he's the naughty one. Naughty became the tide I swam against, the headwind I flew against, the daily expectation I could never hope to share. I didn't want to be naughty. I wanted to be noble. I wanted to be good. Work hard, grow up, and do something meaningful in my days. But every sin, every misstep, every setback triggered the same tired label and the same public condemnations, and thereby reinforced the conventional wisdom that I was innately naughty. Things might have been different if I'd achieved good grades, but I didn't, and everyone knew it. My reports were in the public domain. The whole Commonwealth was aware of my academic struggles, which were largely due to being overmatched at eating. No one ever discussed the other probable cause. Mummy. Study, concentration, requires an alliance with the mind. And in my teen years, I was waging all-out war with mine. I was forever fending off his darkest thoughts, his basest fears, his fondest memories. The fonder the memory, the deeper the ache. I'd found strategies for doing this, some healthy, some not, but all quite effective. And whenever they were unavailable, for instance, when I was forced to sit quietly with a book, I freaked out. Naturally, I avoided such situations. At all costs, I avoided sitting quietly with a book. It struck me at some point that the whole basis of education was memory. A list of names, a column of numbers, a mathematical formula, a beautiful poem. To learn it, you had to upload it to the part of the brain that stored stuff. That was the same part of my brain I was resisting. My memory had been spotty since Mummy disappeared, by design, and I didn't want to fix it, because memory equaled grief. Not remembering was bomb. It's also possible that I'm misremembering my own struggles with memory from back then, because I do recall being very good at memorizing some things, like long passages from Ace Ventura and The Lion King. I'd recite them often, to mates, to myself. Also, there's a photo of me sitting in my room at my pull-out desk, and there amid the cubbyholes and chaotic pages sits the silver-framed photo of Mummy. So, despite my clear memory of not wanting to remember her, I was also trying gamely not to forget her. Difficult as it was for me to be the naughty one and the stupid one, there was anguish for Paul, because it meant I was his opposite. What troubled him most was how I went out of my way to avoid books. Paul didn't really enjoy books, he exalted them, especially Shakespeare. He adored Henry V. He compared himself to Prince Hal. There were multiple full stops in his life, like Lord Mountbatten, his beloved great uncle, and Lawrence Vanderbilt, the irascible intellectual acolyte of Carl Jung. When I was about 6 or 7, Paul went to Stratford and delivered a fiery public defence of Shakespeare. Standing in the place where Britain's greatest writer was born and died, Paul decried the neglect of Shakespeare's plays in schools, the fading of Shakespeare from British classrooms, and from the nation's collective consciousness. Paul peppered this fiery oration with quotations from Hamlet, Macbeth, Othello, The Tempest, The Merchant of Venice. He plucked the lines from thin air, like petals from one of his homegrown roses, and tossed them into the audience. It was showmanship, but not in an empty way. He was making the point. You should all be able to do this. You should all know these lines. They're our shared heritage. We should be cherishing them, safeguarding them, and instead we're letting them die. I never doubted how much it upset Pa that I was part of the Shakespeareless hordes, and I tried to change. I read in Hamlet, lonely prince, obsessed with dead parent, watches remaining parent fall in love with dead parent's usurper. I slammed it shut. No, thank you. Pa never stopped fighting the good fight. He was spending more time at Highgrove, his 350-acre estate in Gloucestershire, and it was just down the road from Stratford, so he made a point of taking me now and then. He'd turn up unannounced, watch whatever play they were putting on. It didn't matter to Paul. It didn't matter to me either, though for different reasons. It was all torture. On many nights I didn't understand most of what was taking place or being said on stage, and when I did understand, worse for me, the words burned, they troubled. Why would I want to hear about a grief-stricken kingdom contracted in one brow of woe? That just put me in mind of August 1997. Why would I want to meditate upon the inalterable fact that all that lives must die, passing through nature to eternity? I had no time to think about eternity. The one piece of literature I remember enjoying, even savouring, was the slender American novel of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck. We were assigned it in our English teams. Unlike Shakespeare, Steinbeck didn't need a translator. He wrote in plain, simple vernacular. Better yet, he kept it tight, at Mice and Men, a brisk 150 pages. Best of all, its plot was diverting. Two blokes, George and Lenny, gadding about California, looking for a place to call their own, trying to overcome their limitations. Neither's a genius, and Lenny's trouble seems to be more than low IQ. He keeps a dead mouse in his pocket, strokes it with his thumb for comfort. He also loves the puppy so much that he kills it. A story about friendship, about brotherhood, about loyalty, was filled with themes I found relatable. George and Lenny put me in mind of Willie and me. Two pals, two nomads, going through the same things, watching each other's back. As Steinbeck has one character say, a guy needs somebody to be near him. The guy goes nuts if he ain't got nobody. It's so true. I wanted to share it with Willie. Too bad he was still pretending not to know me. Chapter 21. Must have been early spring, 1999. I must have been home from Eton for the weekend. I woke to find Pa on the edge of my bed, saying I was going back to Africa. Africa, Pa? Yes, Tommy boy. Why? It was the same old problem, he explained. I was facing a longish school holiday over Easter, and something needed to be done with me. So, Africa. Botswana to be precise. A safari. A safari? With you, Pa? No. Alas, he wouldn't be going along this time. But Willie would. Oh, good. There's someone very special, he added, acting as our African guide. Who, Pa? Marco. Marco? I barely knew the man, though I'd heard good things. He was Willie's minder, and Willie seemed to like him very much. Everyone did, for that matter. Of all Pa's people, there was consensus that Marco was the best. The roughest, the toughest, the most dashing. Long-time Welsh guard, raconteur, man's man, through and through. I was so excited about the prospect of this mock-and safari. I don't know how I got through the following weeks of school. I don't actually recall getting through them, in fact. Memory winks out completely right after Pod delivered the news, then snaps back into focus as I'm boarding British Airways jet with Marco and Willie and Tiggy, one of our nannies. Our favourite nanny, to be accurate, though Tiggy couldn't stand being called that. She'd bite the head off anyone who tried. I'm not the nanny, I'm your friend. Mummy, sadly, didn't see it that way. Mummy saw Tiggy not as a nanny but as a rival. It's common knowledge that Mummy suspected Tiggy was being groomed as her future replacement. Did Mummy see Tiggy as her spare? Now this same woman, whom Mummy feared as her possible replacement, was her actual replacement. How dreadful for Mummy. Every hug or head pat from Tiggy, therefore, must have unleashed some twinge of guilt, some throb of disloyalty, and yet I don't remember that. I remember only heart-racing joy to have Tiggy next to me, telling me to buckle my seatbelt. We flew direct to Johannesburg, then by prop plane to Mount, the largest city in northern Botswana. There we met up with a large group of safari guides, who steered us into a convoy of open-top 9 cruisers. We drove off straight into pure wilderness towards the vast Okavango Delta, which I soon discovered was possibly the most exquisite place in the world. The Okavango is often called a river, but as I call in Windsor Castle a house. The vast inland delta, smack in the middle of the Kalahari Desert, one of the largest deserts on Earth. The lower Okavango is bone dry for part of the year. But come late summer, it begins to fill with floodwaters from upstream. Little droplets that begin as rainfall in the Angola highlands and slowly swell to a trickle, and then a flow which steadily transforms the delta into not one river, but dozens. From outer space, it looks like the chambers of a heart filling with blood. With water comes life, a profusion of animals, possibly the most biodiverse collection anywhere. They come to drink, bathe, mate. Imagine if the Ark suddenly appeared, then capsized. As we neared this enchanted place, I had trouble catching my breath. Lions, zebras, giraffes, hippos, surely this was all a dream. At last we stopped, our campsite for the next week. The spot was bustling with more guides, more trackers, a dozen people at least. Lots of high fives, bear hugs, names flung at us. Harry, William, say hello to Aidan. 20 years old, long hair, sweet smile. Harry, William, say hi to Roger and David. And at the centre of it all stood Marco, like a traffic cop, directing, cajoling, embracing, barking, laughing, always laughing. In no time he pulled our campsite into shape. Big green canvas tents, soft canvas chairs grouped in circles, including one enormous circle around a stone-rimmed campfire. When I think about that trip, my mind goes immediately to that fire, just as my skinny body did then. The fire was where we'd all collect at regular intervals throughout the day. First thing in the morning, again at midday, again at dusk, and above all, after supper. We'd stare into that fire, look up at the universe. The stars looked like spots on the logs. One of the guides called the fire Bush TV. Yes, they said, every time you throw a new log on, it's like changing the channel. They all loved that. The fire, I noticed, hypnotized or narcotized every adult in our party. In its orange glow, their faces grew softer, their tongues looser. And as the hour got later, out came the whiskey, and they would all undergo another sea change. Their laughter would get louder. They'd think, more of this, please. More fire, more talk, more loud laughter. I'd been scared of darkness all my life, and it turned out Africa had a cure. The campfire. Chapter 22. Marco, the largest member of the group, also laughed the loudest. There was some ratio between the size of his body and the radius of his bellows. Also, there was a similar link between the volume of his voice and the bright shade of his hair. I was a ginger, self-conscious about it. Marco was an extreme ginger, and old. I gawped at him and thought, teach me to be like that. Marco, however, wasn't a typical teacher. Perpetually moving, perpetually doing, he loved many things: food, travel, nature, guns, us. But he had no interest in giving lectures. He was more about leading by example and having a good time. He was one great big ginger Mardi Gras, and if you wanted to join the party, wonderful. And if not, that was grand too. I wondered dreaded many times watching him wolf his dinner, gulp his gin, shout another joke, slap another tracker on the back, why more people weren't like this guy. Why didn't more at least try? I wanted to ask Willie what it was like to have such a man minding him, guiding him, apparently the Eton rule carried over to Botswana. Willie didn't want to know me in the bush any more than he did back at school. One thing about Marco that gave me pause was his time in the Welsh Guards. I'd sometimes look at him on that trip and see those 8 Welsh Guards in their red tunics, hoisting that coffin onto their shoulders, marching down the Abbey Arch. I tried to remind myself that Marco wasn't there that day. I tried to remind myself that, anyway, the box was empty. All was well. When Tiggy suggested I go to bed always before everyone else, I didn't squawk. The days were long, the tent was a welcome cocoon. His canvas smelled pleasantly of old books. His floor was covered with soft antelope skins. My bed was wrapped in a cozy African rug. For the first time in months, years, I'd drop off straight away. Of course, it helped to have that campfire glowing against the wall, to hear those adults on the other side and the animals beyond. Screeches, bleats, roars, what a racket they made after dark. Their busy time. Their rush hour. The later it got, the louder they got. I found it soothing. I also found it hilarious. No matter how loud the animals, I could still hear Marco laughing. One night before I fell asleep, I made myself a promise. I'm going to find a way to make that guy laugh. Chapter 23. Like me, Marco had a sweet tooth. Like me, he particularly loved puddings. We always called them puds. So I got the idea of spiking his pudding with Tabasco sauce. At first he'd howl, but then he'd realise it was a trick and laugh. Oh, how he'd laugh. Then he realised it was me and laughed louder. I couldn't wait. The next night, as everyone tucked into their dinner, I tiptoed out of the meal tent. I went down the footpath, 50 metres, into the kitchen tent, and poured a whole teacup of Tabasco into Marco's bowl of pudding. It was bread and butter, Mummy's favourite. The kitchen crew saw me, but I put a finger to my lips. They chuckled. Scurrying back into the meal tent, I gave Tiggy a wink. I'd already taken her into my confidence. She thought the whole cake would be brilliant. I don't remember if I told Willie what I was up to. Probably not. I knew he wouldn't have approved. I squirmed, counting the minutes until dessert was served, fighting back giggles. Suddenly someone cried out, "Whoa!" Someone else cried, "What the?" In unison, we all turned. Just outside the open tent was a tawny tail swishing through the air. Leopard! Everyone froze, except me. I took a step towards it. Marco gripped my shoulder. The leopard walked away, like a prima ballerina, across the footpath where I'd just been. I turned back in time to see the adults all look at one another, mouths open. Holy fuck. And their eyes turned towards me. Holy fuck. They were all thinking the same thing, picturing the same banner headline back home. Prince Harry, all by leopard. The world would reel, heads would roll. I wasn't thinking about any of that. I was thinking about Mummy. That leopard was clearly a sign from her. A messenger she'd sent to say, all is well, and all will be well. At the same time, I also thought, horror. What if Mummy would come out of hiding at last, only to learn that her youngest son had been eaten alive? Chapter 24. As a royal, you were always taught to maintain a buffer zone between you and the rest of creation. Even working a crowd, you always kept a discreet distance between yourself and them. Distance was right. Distance was safe. Distance was survival. Distance was an essential bit of being royal. No less than standing on the balcony, waving to the crowds outside Buckingham Palace, and family all around you. Of course, family included distance as well. No matter how much you might love someone, you could never cross that chasm between, say, monarch and child, or heir and spare, physically but also emotionally. It wasn't just Willie's edict about giving him space. The older generation maintained a nearly zero-tolerance prohibition on all physical contact. No hugs, no kisses, no pats, now and then maybe a light touch on cheeks on special occasions. In Africa, none of this was true. In Africa, distance dissolved. All creatures mingled freely. Only the lion walked with his head in the air. Only the elephant had a mental strut. But even they weren't totally aloof. They mingled daily among their subjects. They had no choice. Yes, there was predation and prey. Life could be nasty and brutish and short, but to my teenage eyes, it all looked like distilled old democracy, utopia. And that wasn't even counting the bear hugs and high fives from all the trackers and guides. On the other hand, maybe it wasn't the mere closeness of living things that I liked. Maybe it was the mind-boggling number. In a matter of hours, I'd gone from a place of aridity, sterility, death, to a wetland of teeming fertility. Maybe that was what I yearned for most of all. Life. Maybe that was the real miracle I found in the Okavanga in April 1989. I don't think I blinked once that whole week. I don't think I stopped grinning, even while asleep. Had I been transported back to the Jurassic period? I couldn't have been more awed. It wasn't just T-Rexes that had me captivated. I loved the littlest creatures too, and the birds. Thanks to Adi, clearly the savviest guide in our group, I began to recognize hooded vultures, cattle egrets, southern carmine bee-eaters, African fish eagles in flight. Even the bugs were compelling. Adi taught me to really see them. Look down, he said. Note the different species of beetle. Admire the beauty of larvae. Also appreciate the Baroque architecture of termite mounds, the tallest structures built by any animal besides humans. So much to know, Harry, to appreciate. Right, baby. Whenever I went with him on a wander, whenever we'd come upon a fresh carcass crawling with maggots or wild dogs, whenever we'd stumble on a mountain of elephant dung sprouting mushrooms that looked like the Artful Dodger's top hat, Adi never cringed. Circle of life, Harry. Of all the animals in our midst, Adi said, the most majestic was the water. The Okavanga was just another living thing. He walked its entire length as a boy with his father, carrying nothing but bedrolls. He knew the Okavanga inside and out, and felt for it something like romantic love. Its surface was a poreless cheek, which he often lightly stroked. He also felt for the river, a kind of sober awe, respect. Its innards were death, he said. Hungry crocs, ill-tempered hippos, they were all down there, in the dark, waiting for you to slip up. Hippos killed 500 people a year. 80 drummed it into my head over and over, and all these years later I can still hear him. Never go into the dark water. One night around the fire, all the guides and trackers discussed the river, shouting stories about riding it, swimming it, boating it, veering it, everyone talking over each other. I heard it all that night. The mysticism of the river, the sacredness of the river, the weirdness of the river. Speaking of weirdness, the smell of marijuana wafted on the air. The stories grew louder, sillier. I asked if I could try it. Everyone guffawed, sod off, when he looked at me in horror. But I wouldn't back off. I pleaded my case. I was experienced, I said. Head swung around. Oh, really? Hennis and I had recently pinched 2 6-packs of Smirnoff Ice and drunk them till we passed out, they boasted. Thus, Tiggy always let me have a nip of her flask on stalking trips. Slow gin, she was never without her. I thought it best to leave out the full breadth of my experience. The adults exchanged sly glances. One shrugged, rolled a new joint, passed it to me. I took a puff, coughed, retched. African weed was much harsher than eating weed, and the high was less too. But at least I was a man. No, I was still a wee baby. The joint was just fresh basil wrapped in a bit of filthy rolling paper. Chapter 25. Hugh and Emily were old friends of Pa's. They lived in Norfolk, and we often went to visit them for a week or two during school holidays and summers. They had 4 sons with whom Willie and I were always thrown together, like pups into a bunch of pit bulls. We played games. One day hide and seek, the next capture the flag. But whatever the game, it was always an excuse for a massive scrap. And whatever the scrap, there were no winners because there were no rules. Hair pulling, eye gouging, arm twisting, sleeper holds, all was fair in love and war and at Hugh and Emily's country house. As the youngest and the smallest, I always took the brunt. I also did the most escalating, the most asking for it, so I deserved everything I got. Black eye, violet welt, puffed lip, I didn't mind. On the contrary, maybe I wanted to look tough, maybe I just wanted to feel something. Whatever my motivation, my simple philosophy when it came to scrapping was, more please. 6 of us cloaked our pretend battles in historic names. Hugh and Emily's house would often be converted into Waterloo, the Somme, Rorke's Drift. I can see us charging each other, screaming, Zulu! Battle lines were often bloodlines, though not always. It wasn't always Windsor versus others. We'd mix and match. Sometimes I was fighting alongside Willie, sometimes against. No matter the alliances, though, it often happened that one or two of Hugh and Emily's boys would turn and set upon Willie. I'd hear him crying out for help, and down would come the red mist, like a blood vessel bursting behind my eyes. I'd lose all control, all ability to focus on anything but family, country, tribe, and hurl myself at someone, everyone. Picking, punching, strangling, taking out legs. Hugh and Emily's boys couldn't deal with that. There was no dealing with them. Get him off! He's mad! I don't know how effective or skilled a fighter I was, but I always succeeded in providing enough diversion for Willie to get away. He'd check his injuries, wipe his nose, and jump straight back in. When the scrap finally ended for good, when we hobbled away together, I always felt such love for him, and I sensed love in return, but also some embarrassment. I was half Willie's size, half his weight. I was the younger brother. He was supposed to save me, not the other way around. Over time, the scraps became more pitched. Small arms fire was introduced. We'd hurl Roman candles at each other, make rocket launches from golf ball tubes, stage night battles with two of us defending a stone pillbox in the middle of an open field. I can still smell the smoke and hear the hiss as a projectile rocketed towards a victim, whose only armour would be a puffer jacket, some wool mittens, maybe some ski goggles, though often not. Our arms race accelerated, as they do. We began to use BB guns at close range. How was no one maimed? How did no one lose an eye? One day, all 6 of us were walking in the woods near their house, looking for squirrels and pigeons to cull. There was an old army Land Rover. Willie and the boys smiled. Harold, jump in, drive away, and we'll shoot you. With what? Shotgun. No thanks. We're loading. Either get in and drive, or we shoot you right here. We jumped in, drove away. Moments later, bang! Buckshot rattling off the back. I cackled and hit the accelerator. Somewhere on the estate was a construction site. Hugh and Emily were building a new house. This became the setting for possibly our fiercest battle. It was around dusk. One brother was in the shell of the new house, taking heavy fire. When he retreated, we bombarded him with rockets. And then, he was gone. Where's Nick? We shone a torch. No Nick. We marched forward steadily, came upon a giant hole in the ground, almost like a square well alongside the construction site. We peered over the edge and shone a torch down. Far below, lying on his back, Nick was moaning. Damn lucky to be alive, we all agreed. What a great opportunity, we said. We lit some firecrackers, big ones, and dropped them down into the pit. Chapter 26. When there were no other boys around, no other common enemies, Willie and I would turn on each other. It happened most often in the back seat, while Pa drove us somewhere. A country house, say, or a salmon stream. Once, in Scotland, on the way to the River Spey, we started scuffling, and soon were in a full scrap, rolling back and forth, trading blows. Pa swerved to the side of the road, shouted at Willie to get out. Me? Why me? I didn't feel the need to explain. Out. Willie turned to me, furious. He felt I got away with everything. He stepped out of the car, stomped to the backup car with all the bodyguards, strapped himself in. We always wore seatbelts after Mummy's disappearance. The convoy resumed. Now and then, I peered out the back window. Behind us, I could just make out the future King of England, plotting his revenge. Chapter 27. The first time I killed anything, Tiggy said, "Well done, darling." She dipped her long, slender fingers into the rabbit's body, under the flap of smashed fur, scooped out a dollop of blood, and smeared it tenderly across my forehead, and my cheeks and nose. "Now," she said, in her throaty voice, "you are blooded." Blooding, a tradition from the ages, a show of respect for the slain, an act of communion by the slayer. Also, a way to mark the crossing from boyhood into not manhood. No, not that. Something close. And so, notwithstanding my hairless torso and chirpy voice, I considered myself post-blooding to be a full-fledged stalker. Around my 15th birthday, I was informed that I'd be undertaking the true stalker initiation. Red Deer. It happened at Balmoral. Early morning, fog on the hills, mist in the hollows. My guide, Sandy, was 1,000 years old. He looked as if he'd stalked mastodons. Proper old school. That was how Willie and I described him, and other such gents. Sandy talked old school, smelt old school, definitely dressed old school. Faded camo jacket over ragged green sweaters, Balmoral tweed +4s, socks covered with burrs, Gore-Tex walking boots. On his head was a classic tweed flat cap, thrice my age, brown by eons of sweat. I crept beside him through the heather, through the bog, all morning long. My stag appeared ahead, inching closer, ever closer. He finally stopped and watched the stag munch some dry grass. Sandy made sure we were still downwind. Now he pointed at me, pointed at my rifle. Time. He rolled away, giving me space. He raised his binoculars. I could hear his rattling breath as I took slow aim, squeezed the trigger. One sharp, thunderous crack. Then, silence. We stood, walked forward. When we reached the stag, I was relieved. Its eyes were already cloudy. The worry was always that you'd merely cause a flesh wound and send the poor animal dashing into the woods to suffer alone for hours. As its eyes turned more and more opaque, Sandy knelt before it, took out his gleaming knife, led it from the neck and slit open the belly. He motioned for me to kneel. I knelt. I thought we were going to pray. Sandy snapped at me, closer. I knelt closer, close enough to smell Sandy's armpits. He placed a hand gently behind my neck. Now I thought he was going to hug me, congratulate me. Atta boy. Instead, he pushed my head inside the carcass. I tried to pull away, but Sandy pushed me deeper. I was shocked by his insane strength, and by the infernal smell. My breakfast jumped up from my stomach. Oh please, do not let me vomit inside a stag carcass. After a minute, I couldn't smell anything, because I couldn't breathe. My nose and mouth were full of blood, guts, and a deep, upsetting warmth. Well, I thought, so this is death, the ultimate blooding. Not what I'd imagined. I went limp. Hi, all. Sandy pulled me out. I filled my lungs with fresh morning air. I started to wipe my face, which was dripping, but Sandy grabbed my hand. Nay, lad, nay. What? Let it dry, lad, let it dry. We radioed back to the soldiers in the valley. Horses were sent. While waiting, we got down to work, gave the stag a full grollicking, the old Scottish word for disemboweling. We removed the stomach, scattered the junky bits on the hillside for hawks and buzzards, carved out the liver and heart, snipped the penis, careful not to pop the cord, which would douse you with urine, a stench that 10 Highland baths wouldn't cleanse. The horses arrived. We slung our grallocked stag across a white drum stallion, sent it off to the larder, then walked shoulder to shoulder back to the castle. As my face dried, as my stomach settled, I felt swelling pride. I'd been good to that stag, as I'd been taught. One shot, clean through the heart. Besides being painless, the instant kill had preserved the meat. Had I merely wounded him, or let him get a glimpse of us, his heart would have raced. His blood would have filled with adrenaline. His steaks and fillets would have been